Welcome back to the desk, where joining me now is Jared Kimble to discuss the second half of the NHL season and look ahead already to the playoffs. So let's reference last year's Stanley Cup final between the Bruins and the Blackhawks. Which of those teams is less likely to return to the Stanley Cup final?
Well, honestly, due to all the parity in the NHL, as you know, in the playoffs, anybody can win. So I don't see any of these teams making it, honestly. I mean, the Bruins, I believe, are the worst team of the two. Obviously, the Blackhawks have an elite offensive talent. They have 7 players in the top 100 in points in the league. They're first in goal score and third in power play efficiency. Yes, I know it upsets you, but I'm going to have to go with the Boston Bruins. They're the least likely to make it back. You know, they have a lot of inexperience on the D-line, as you probably may know. Dennis Seidenberg out for the season. Adam McQuaid keep going back and forth with that injury bug. And so they have a couple of first and second year players, Dougie Hamilton, Torrey Krug. You know, their offensive productivity is very, very good, but there's a couple times when they get caught looking at the puck and watching it go into the back of the net. They also have some inexperience on the offensive side. Riley Smith and Carl Soderberg only have 76 points in this regular season, but overall they only have 0 points in the playoffs and 2 games combined in the postseason. Not a lot of talent there for postseason.
You make some pretty decent points about my Bruins, but you're wrong because we're going back. Last year we were in the same place and we made a good deal at the trade deadline. They got us some pieces.
Still time.
Still time to do that, so I still have faith in my Bruins. But which team currently that is first in their division right now is not going to end up there at the end of the season?
Well, you know, the Ducks and the Penguins in their divisions, I feel like they're going to just lock it up. They're pretty far ahead. The only two that are really questionable is the Bruins are in first. Obviously, we just talked about them. And Tampa and Montreal are right behind that. But I'm going to talk about the Blues over the Blackhawks. Right now, they are tied, but the Blackhawks have the upper hand. They're tied with 86 points in the Central. But the Blues are such a great team. They lead the NHL in goal differential with plus 61. They're one of the stronger teams at home, which they have a pretty good home schedule coming up here, a couple easy games. And I loved their trade. Honestly, if you look at it, they're setting up for the playoffs this year. Ryan Miller, I think he's a great player still. A lot of people still give him, you know, some bad hype because he played for Buffalo. But ultimately, I think he has what it takes to play well in the playoffs. They have the best offensive ratio to goals against in the NHL, and they have a great special teams unit on penalty kill and power play. So I think they really do have what it takes to be first in that division.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, that's really the only race right now that's really that close.
Yeah.
Even in the East, you're mentioning the Bruins are still 5 or 6 points ahead of the next person up. So I'm with you. I think the Blackhawks, if anybody, won't finish first. Let's move on to what team currently that is not in the playoff race is going to sneak in and make a late push.
Well, there's a ton. You know, Washington in the East, also Columbus in that division. But I'm going to have to go with a little sneaky pick, and that's Winnipeg out in the West. They're just a couple points out of the second wildcard spot. I believe it's only 1. They have great balanced scoring from their first line to the third line. They're only 5th in the league in allowing goals. And Paul Maurice, during the Olympic break, changed up their zone exits and entrances, and they've had a higher possession play in the past 2 games since the Olympic break, which I think will really help them going into the rest of the season. They have a lot of home games finishing up at the end of the season, which is definitely going to help them. The fans are going to really be in it towards the end of the season, trying to get them in the playoffs, which I think will really help. They do need to get Pavlik some rest. There has been problems with them playing him way too much during the regular season. So if him and Al Montoya, their backup, can get equal playing time, I think if they play well, Winnipeg could ultimately sneak into that 1 or 2 wildcard spot.
That's an interesting pick. I wouldn't have thought of that. I was going to say Washington. You mentioned them before. Yeah. They started off the season absolutely terrible, and they've been one of the better teams since that point. They're tied with Detroit for that last spot in the East right now, so I could definitely see them sneaking into that last spot. Up next, Ryan sits down with a guy that you may recognize, our fantasy baseball expert, Joe DiRienzo. Stay tuned.